because you're jumping back into the gap.
Hey coach, welcome to the Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Oliver. I appreciate you joining us for this week's podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit basketballimmersion.com for more coaching resources and access to all the basketball podcasts. I hope you will give us a shout out on social media, on Twitter at @BBallImmersion, or on Instagram at @BasketballImmersion to help me continue to share the game. Enjoy the episode. Coaches, we are excited today to have Coach Fizdale with us. Coach Fizdale was most recently the head coach for the New York Knicks. He previously served as the head coach for the Memphis Grizzlies and was an assistant coach for the Atlanta Hawks, Golden State Warriors, and Miami Heat. And Coach, I can't thank you enough. Thanks for taking the time and sharing the game with us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I love doing this stuff.
Well, and we're going to love having you on. And I'm going to start with something a little bit different, but one of my favorite existential philosophers, Kierkegaard, said, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." And what I take from that is, and I'm curious to get your take on this, is the value of reflection as a coach. Can you talk about that in terms of your experiences with reflection?
Well, I'm a strong believer in self-reflection. I try to instill it in my players. It was really something that was instilled in me as a young kid through my mother, is that before, I've always looked at things from this standpoint, is before you start trying to figure out what everybody else did wrong, look at yourself first and spend time looking at the situation and saying, what could I have done better? And I really do that. I do it day to day, practice to practice, game to game, season to season, job to job. And I really think it's a big part of growth, being able to face and really own where you screwed up and how you can be better. And I think that's the only way that when that next opportunity comes, that you're really going to be prepared to seize the moment.
Well, and I appreciate that. And you said screwed up, and that's a part of it. But I imagine for you and for all of us, it should be a part of it is also what you succeeded with, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can't just beat yourself into the ground. You definitely got to have your buckets of, okay, what's good and what do we have to drop kick out of here, and really try to stay, closer to the things that you're doing well. But, at the same time, understand where you're messing up and what you can do better, and if there's changes that need to be made.
Well, and we're going to probably get into this, but there's a myriad of factors in all coaching that some is controllable and some is less controllable. But maybe just with this reflective concept, what areas do you think you improved the most as a coach over the first head coaching experience to the second?
Oh, man, that's such a tough question because I'm kind of still in my process. I'm still, digesting my last opportunity. And, I do think that I became more patient in my second opportunity than I did in my first. And I think that the first opportunity, I think I've said this before, is that that team was getting older, and that team was going to eventually, they was going to have to start making some tough decisions on different guys that really helped the Memphis Grizzlies become, a team to be reckoned with. And so when I got there, I was in like full speed ahead, like we got to win now, don't have time to do certain things. And it was good and bad, and I learned from both, but I was just one way in that moment. And when I got to New York, I understood that to get over the hump with developing young guys and building a team from scratch, that it was going to take more patience than what I had put in Memphis. And so, that was probably the biggest thing that I took from job to job.
And it's got to be extremely magnified, obviously at the NBA level. But one of the quotes of reflection that I saw you say is, "You cannot rush culture, relationships, trust, and judgment." Can you talk about that? Because that's such a powerful statement to be able to say that in an environment where, honestly, you kind of have to rush it because you have to win.
Yeah, and it's It is what it is. The truth is you can't push a fast forward button on a relationship. You can't make someone trust you or like you or believe in you just because you walk in the door. Like, that really takes time. And when you start talking about 17 guys, a coaching staff, a front office, a medical team, your owner, like those relationships, if you really, going to try to build it out, that takes time. And you just can't, no matter how much you want to fast forward it and it's like making a young guy a better player. You get an 18, 19-year-old and you just want them to get it. And that's not how it works. They got to go through it. They got to take their lumps. They got to take their punches, and they get it over time. And it's just, it really is important that when you're approaching those circumstances, that you understand that those things take, real patience.
Well, and one of the stories from your experience in Memphis that I thought was a brilliant reflection of your ability to be able to communicate and get the why across was when you got Zach Randolph to come off the bench. And can you talk to us, maybe in general terms, if you don't want to share specific, just about dealing with ego and all these pride and all these different things that we want successful players to have, but the challenges then in being able to communicate what you feel is best for them and for the team?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like, and this is what's kind of worked for me throughout my career as an assistant and, in my relationships as a head coach is one, you got to be upfront and honest about, why you're doing something. But I do think it's important a lot of times to point out how it benefits everybody, and not just in some vague way, but give, some real hardline reasons on why this is good for everybody. And, what I told Zebo was, I'm asking Mike Conley to be more aggressive. I'm asking Marc Gasol to be more aggressive. That's going to limit the times you touch the ball. And I still want to be able to utilize you, and highlight you, but I won't be able to do it in that starting lineup. And I said, and the fact is, why in your 15th, 16th year do you want to wrestle with starting power forwards and centers when I can put you in this second unit and you can now go against second line guys with frontline talent? And I said, now I'll make you a promise. Your touches will not change over the course of the time you come off the bench. And so his usage rate was the same as it was the year before. I made a point to that. He got into a real comfort zone fast. It only worked because he agreed and literally never said a word about it to me the whole year. Like, just did it and did it well. And, I challenged him to be the sixth man of the year and say, how can we turn something that looks like maybe a demotion into something that looks like here's a guy that can adapt it, and this is somebody I would want on my team next year in a contract year to be able to start him or come off the bench. I said, you're saying a lot about yourself to our team and to other teams that, you're adaptable. And so he was fantastic in how he handled it. He helped us win games. I ran right back to starting them when we got down 0-2 to popping them in the final, in the playoffs. And he understood why. And, that's why I just have so much respect for the guy and really got a great relationship with him to this day.
Well, it's a tremendous lesson for all of us as coaches. And, what I love about what you just said is obviously you connected the why for him, but more so, and you can talk about this, is how you approach this type of situation, logic rather than emotion, which is a challenge for all of us as coaches.
Yeah. And I think that's where, trust me, I've done it the wrong way.
So have I, coach.
Guns blazing, all emotion in it. The whole reason why I had my guns blazing backfired on me. And you learn from that. And again, that goes back to that trust thing as well. And I think, you just got to know your guys to a point where you got to deal with something that's drastic or something that's going to be, you don't know how it's going to go when you deliver it. I think you just got to take the time to be thoughtful and mindful and fearless and really have your whys in place, your evidence in place. And it's not always going to go smooth. It's not going to always be well received, but that's where you just got to stick to your guns. And that's where, like, a guy like Eric Spoelstra, I really admire so much in watching him while I worked with him, because he really knew how to stick to his guns and stay within the parameters of this culture he was fostering. And, he didn't waver on particulars, and he really stuck to his guns. And that's even with our best players. He was flexible on particular things, but it was just some things that were non-negotiables that he wasn't going to bend on. And, to do that with a team that was as star-studded as that Heat team, it just goes to show you how you got to have some fortitude to be able to coach in that environment.
Take a brief moment to interrupt this podcast to share some information from one of our show supporters. As sports keep coming back, so does your chance to bet on them with our exclusive wagering partner, betonline.ag. Major League Baseball will soon be in full swing, and there are no shortage of ways to get in on the action. BetOnline has all the odds, futures, and props for you to be on. Also tune in as Floyd Money Mayweather joins BetOnline team in a new segment called The Ice is Right, where he talks about his expansive jewelry collection. He'll give you the chance to win some great prizes and bet on the cost of his bling. Visit betonline.ag today to check out all the odds and up-to-date sports news. Don't forget to sign up and take advantage of all the welcome back to sports bonuses. BetOnline, your online wagering experts. Now back to the podcast. Well, and getting into the Miami culture a little bit, you were brought up in it. Obviously, you know it extremely well. But what I'm wondering is the challenges of transporting some of those ideas to other organizations. Even though you know some of those things work and they suit you, it seems like it's not for everyone. And is that a hard part about knowing that Miami culture?
Yeah, and I think, too, even for me, I don't think it's healthy to try to just pick it up out of Miami and be able to, like, sit it somewhere and think it's going to work. That's not how it is. I don't think any culture really works like that. But I do think there's some fundamentals from it that become ingrained in you, and it just becomes your DNA. And, I just always feel like this with any coach and coming in and trying to put your stamp on it, just make sure it's genuine. And so, for some guys, maybe the Heat way is the way. And, like say when their other assistants get their jobs, they're going to be more right to the letter with it. Whereas it may be another coach who takes a chunk of it, but puts his own twist on it. And I think, and I just think personally, if it comes off as genuine and real, and the players can see why you have particular standards and guidelines and things you all commit to and abide by for the greater good. As long as they can see that and understand that, I think you get a lot of buy-in. But I just think that ultimately it has to be genuine to you as a coach. Otherwise, if you come off as phony, it'll backfire on you.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And obviously, this is another thing that I've read you say, and that's this concept of working within an organization and having to win the people in your building. That you can't win a game without winning the people in your building first.
Yeah. I think it's I think it's really important that when you get a job or you take over somewhere, that you don't start playing the games right away. You gotta really take the time to know the people who's going to be working in that building every single day with your staff and your players, and who's doing all of the grunt work that's not being rewarded, that's not glamorous. And I just really feel like making those people feel like they matter, and making them have a name and not just somebody that's in the background. I think people really buy into what you're trying to do. And, when you reflect what you're trying to get done, which my big thing was I always wanted to be of service to everybody. when you're doing it, then everybody else is going to do it. And it really, it's fun to see it radiate through the building. And a lot of that radiation happens because you respect the people for who they are and what they bring to the table.
Yeah, tremendous insights for all of us. And we're going to jump around a little bit because I'm just excited to talk to you about so many different things. But going back to maybe you as the person, and I've read this or I heard this from someone that you're a big believer in the growth mindset and the research from Carol Dweck. Can you talk a little bit about that and then how that's impacted your coaching and your approach?
Yeah, really Spo turned me on to it. I learned so much from Spo. I can't even don't have enough time to talk about it. But Spo threw the book at me one day, and people don't notice he's a mean guy. He just threw the book at me. So somebody, he's like, read this. So we always try to exchange those type of things and ideas. And he's like, it's great. It's great. He's like, just read it. And so I really got into it. And I think sometimes there's certain things that hit veins with Spo and I that were just like, yes, like that. That's the best way of phrasing this whole thing. And are you fixed or are you about growth? And we really tried to institute that and practice that within the Heat culture. And that's where I learned that the culture is what it is, but there is room where it allows for this adaptability and change to happen within it. And, that's a credit to Pat for giving it that flexibility with knowing that it won't break. And so we Spo and I really try to pour that into the culture is getting everybody to have a growth mindset, get everybody thinking bigger, more, and not being fixed on, well, this is how I've always done it. That was like the thing we always used to tell the coaching staff and the players. We don't want to hear them ever say is, this is how I've always done it, because you've already lost if that's it. And so because of him, I really, really put that into I wove that into my fabric. And, I really try to put that in terms of my life in general, and how I live on a day-to-day basis. So, but I owe Spo that.
Well, I can vouch for that because a few years ago, Coach Spolstra had me in to speak to the staff about a lot of the evidence-based ideas I share. And again, I was blown away with the open-mindedness from, again, such a successful coach, successful organization, and all the people in the room. And what always struck me was how good the questions were. And I find that's a reflection of people that really want to have this growth mindset. Is that something that's within your mindset as well, is to be able to ask really good questions?
Well, I think the questions always start off from being thoughtful. I just think you take the time. It goes back to what we talked about, reflection, self-reflection. As I'm just one of those people, as I take information in, I try to connect it to my own experiences and find where it overlaps and interlocks, and how, okay, I see how this can help me, or where this can really make my life better, and things like that. And so when I'm taking in information, as I'm going through that process, I formulate my questions, out of how to take what you're giving me and how does that lead me on this path to improve something. And so I think a lot of us, from having an open mind and a growth mindset and always looking for ways to improve, we all kind of think from that standpoint and always want to ask, really good questions. And, it's even with my teams, like I put them in a lot of situations where they have to interact with the coaches and interact with each other. I let them run film. I do small group platoon stuff where I put, all of the forwards in the room to watch film together like football. And I'll let them run the session with the coaches just kind of hanging in the background if they need navigation. And, what it ends up creating is really a really cool thing to see how guys really learn how to communicate with each other. So things like that, where, that's the kind of stuff that you get from being around growth mindset type people.
Yeah, and I imagine, again, like we won't spend too much time on here, but that's a challenge because some players come in with very fixed mindsets, having got that from coaches, from trainers, from, agents, other people. I mean, so part of that is to be able to nurture this growth mindset in them to be able to help them truly approach their potential, right?
Yeah, just what my man say on Moneyball, adapt or die.
Absolutely.
Most young players, like I said, were stars their whole life. If they got to the NBA, most of these guys were the best player on their team most of their life. And then all of a sudden they get here and it's like, well, it's not working. And they're looking to you for the answer. And the bottom line is it takes time. And it takes time for these guys to improve. And they got to stay with it. And it's the first time that they're running into real adversity from the standpoint of their game. And so really trying to get them to not be fixed in this is how I've always done it, right? That attitude, you can say, well, you better change up or you won't be doing this for long. And most players hear that loud and clear on the NBA level and they start to take it in. But ultimately, you win their trust. They know you're there trying to give them the best opportunity and trying to make them as good as they can possibly be and, make it that you're doing it together. Most guys really, really open their mind up to, what you're trying to teach them.
So shifting a little bit before we come back to some of the culture and mindset type stuff, I want to use your expertise, technical, tactical, and talk about something that's obviously prevalent in the game. That's defending the 3-point line. What are some strategies or some ideas for the coaches that are listening now? Because it's obviously become such an important part. What are some ideas that we should be focusing more on in defending the 3-point line?
I don't know if you want me answering that. My team stuck guarding the three, but
well, this is part of self-reflection, right?
Yeah, I think what I've always tried to really stress is one, how do you kill the easy three? How do you eliminate the actual attempts on easy threes? Knowing personnel, which guys you really need to run off the line and which guys you need to be there to just challenge. Just really emphasizing those areas. How you get to it systematically, obviously you don't want to scramble as much. So switching obviously plays a lot into it. If you got the personnel that can keep the guard in front on the switch, or you got a guard that can take a big in the post and hold his own without having to bring a double team all the time, that'll limit the number of open threes people get. But then ultimately you got to have great effort and be committed to making multiple efforts in a possession. A lot of times with these well-coached teams and good ball movement teams with multiple shooters on the floor and, some big-time attacker or roll big that you're facing, you got to have a team that's willing to put multiple efforts together in a possession to win the possession. And so, I think you're asking a great question because obviously the 3-ball is the thing that's killing a lot of people right now. And, but I think the more if you can really try to streamline it and simplify it for your team and the areas that you're trying to eliminate, are you giving up corner threes before slot threes? Most teams won't. Most teams want to kill the corner because it's the higher percentage shot. And really drilling those habits into your guys to be able to think that on the fly in the middle of a game, that they see a guy in the slot and they stun at him and stay with the corner guy. And then still being able to adjust on the fly, knowing that the guy in the slot is a big-time shooter and the guy in the corner isn't, and saying, okay, this time I'm going to rotate. When you really get developed and can evolve to that, that's when your team is really going to be good. But ultimately, I think get 3 or 4 real important things to you and hammer them home.
Absolutely. That's great stuff. Great guidance to be able to help move forward. And as you're talking, just again, reflecting back maybe on your time with the Heat, what role did you find yourself most playing during the championship run? Because we can talk about a lot of different roles for assistants, but what was the most effective role, or what did you find yourself doing the most for that team to help them?
No, that's a hard question to answer because the cool part about our staff is no one was like necessarily lodged into a role. Like, if Spo asks you a question, he wants to answer. He didn't care if he was the video guy or me or Ron Rothstein or whoever. But, I mean, the things I tried to do and tried to feel, obviously was I tried to, help him with game planning as much as possible and strategy. I always tried to look at his job from 25,000 feet and say, okay, what are the possible landmines that's coming his way that when maybe he's not going to see because he's in the storm, and try to make sure that he doesn't run into any tough situations that way. Obviously developing players was everybody's job. We just felt like that was a role of all of the coaches. So, we spent a lot of time with that. I tried to put out smoke before there was ever fire, so that if it was something he didn't need to deal with, I was always there to take care of that kind of stuff. If a player wanted to vent or player was, not seeing things, from a place of reality, I would try to step in and talk to that player and get them back to the right mind frame before it ever gets to him, because he's got enough on his plate. And so, and then obviously I would try to, do my part in communicating and making sure that, if it was something that he didn't have time to meet with the staff on, and we all did this, but we would always echo information around to each other and make sure that everybody knew where his head was at and what he was thinking, and keeping everybody organized and on the right track.
Take a brief moment to interrupt this podcast to share some information from one of our show supporters. As sports keep coming back, so does your chance to bet on them with our exclusive wagering partner, betonline.ag. Major League Baseball will soon be in full swing, and there are no shortage of ways to get in on the action. BetOnline has all the odds, futures, and props for you to be on. Also tune in as Floyd Money Mayweather joins BetOnline team in a new segment called The Ice is Right, where he talks about his expansive jewelry collection. He'll give you the chance to win some great prizes and bet on the cost of his bling. Visit betonline.ag today to check out all the odds and up-to-date sports news. Don't forget to sign up and take advantage of all the welcome back to sports bonuses. BetOnline, your online wagering experts. Hey coaches, brief interruption from our podcast to hear from manscaped.com. 2020 has been the year of things happening that are completely out of your control, but there is one thing that you can control, and that's shaving your bush. You may be surprised how many coaches have already DM'd me about this special offer. I wasn't, because I'm a user and manscaped.com is definitely worth it. Our sponsors at Manscaped are here to remind you to do so. The Manscaped Lawnmower 3.0 is a premium electric trimmer that's designed to give you a confidence boost through body image. Their ceramic blade and skin-safe technology are designed to reduce nicks and tugs on your fellows down low. The Lawnmower 3.0 is also waterproof and comes with an LED light so you can manscape in the shower, in the dark, or in a dark shower, whatever floats your boat. Go to manscaped.com and check out some of these life-changing products. In fact, listeners of this show will get 20% off plus free shipping with the code ARMCHAIR at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code ARMCHAIR. It's time to grab 2020 by the horns by shaving that front trunk. Now back to the podcast. Yeah, I'm curious, you said echo, which is obviously so important. Is that something that when you went into your head coaching jobs, is that something that you felt you had to teach some assistants, the value of that? Or is that something that's just you assume they have this knowledge?
No, you got to try to teach it. And it's uncomfortable sometimes because, it just depends on how you communicate. Some people want to sit down in group meetings all the time. Some people want to have face-to-face. Some people can just go and not do any of it. And so I just felt like, for me, it was always a good balance of, group meetings, sometimes face-to-face with individual assistants, or if I just wanted them to know something and have an emphasis on something, is just echo it through the building. Hey, let's make sure today everybody is emphasizing blocking out. Echo that to the coaching staff. And boom, immediately everybody got the message and knew that's something we was going to be focusing on that day was, blockouts or something like that. So I just found from my comfort zone, I like having a balance of those interactions, whether it's group, small group, or, down, sending information down the line.
Very cool. More back to some of the offensive and defensive concepts maybe that you used. Did you find there's consistency from your two head coaching jobs, or did you have to change some of your absolutes because of the personnel, because they were very different teams, obviously?
Yeah, I think you just evolve as you go through it, and you look at your personnel and you try to weigh what you have versus what you know and what you've always done. And I think that you have to be realistic and look at your teams and say, okay, well, this team, probably can't do the same things as a team like this. Maybe my young guys can't handle what Marc Gasol can handle. Marc Gasol is a wizard defensively. He can see everything you're trying to do. He can take away your second option. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's ahead of the game, where here's these young guys seeing a situation for the first time. Can I ask them to do the things that Marc Gasol and Mike Conley were doing? And it's probably not fair of that to ask them of that. We'll try to put them in more situations where they can just fly around and not have to overthink it. And so you evolve with your team and you try to be, like I said, open-minded to what makes, what makes a player a better player for you. And so, but I definitely changed over the course of time from one place to the next.
Another thing that comes through is obviously you've coached so many elite players and some all-time greats. And I find that for a lot of newer young coaches, coaching the best players is a real challenge. And not just in terms of their confidence to coach them, but sometimes they feel like they don't need the coaching and the other players need more of it. But that's a mistake, isn't it? The best players really do crave coaching.
They love coaching. You can't bullshit them. That's all at the end of the day. You can't bring them information that's not going to challenge them and put them at a higher level. And they see through it, and they'll call you out on it. And so, and I've said this before, is when you deal with guys like Ray Allen or Dwayne or any of these guys, you have to be prepared to learn more than you teach, because you're dealing with an expert when you're talking about a great player. He is an expert at his craft. And am I more of an expert at teaching than he is at doing it? And so you have to find that balance of, like, be willing to listen and watch and study. So now when you do decide you're going to coach them on something, it's tangible, it's meaningful, it's thoughtful. You've really evaluated and watched the film and watched his body movement, his body mechanics, and you've shown him the edits, and now he sees it and he understands what's going on and why you're doing what you're doing. But you got to have a patience to that. It's not just about jumping on the floor and, I'm going to tell him this and I'm going to coach this. And nah, that's not really how it works out. It's much more of, again, building the trust. And, once you do have that trust, then there is more back and forth because they know that you're going to challenge them. But I think early on, you got to spend time really listening and watching and really trying to evaluate and strategize on how you can make this already great player even better. And, because there's not a whole lot of things you're going to be able to look at that guy and say, I can make him better at this, because he's already got that on the checked off on the box on the board. And so So you really got to take the time to figure out what you can add to that person's game, especially as they age.
I'm not sure if you can think of a specific example, or certainly this can be a general answer, but you mentioned the expertise of a player like a Dwayne Wade or something like that. So do you have an example of something that you learned from working with a Dwayne Wade that then you could apply to other players? Some type of skill, some types of perceptual ability, maybe some type of approach, things like that you took away from an expert and could apply to others?
Gosh, that's a great question. It kind of putting me on the spot, but I think with him,
And it can be any player, coach. Don't it's just Dwayne as an example.
well, the thing I noticed with Dwayne and LeBron, and I don't know how you get this, or maybe you emphasize it to your players at a young age, your kids at a young age. But the one thing I noticed about them, and what separates a great player from a good player, was their ability to. We would work on something that morning at shoot around, and not only would they do it in the game, but they would do it well that night. And they would have only tried it, so many reps during shoot around. And that's when I realized there's a difference. And Spo used to say this too about Dwayne. It's like, with him, you don't have to do, 20,000 reps or something for him to get it. For whatever reason, when he sees it, it goes into the system, his body can just do it. And you just tightening him up along the edges as he's doing it. And he and LeBron both. I remember we worked on with LeBron. We kept talking about it, but we hadn't gotten to it. And he was like, man, let's work on our running hook. He's like, I think I can have a great running hook. I'm like, yeah, I do too. And so at Dad's shoot around, we was working on it. And even Coach Riles, I remember Coach Riles coming onto the court and talking about it, because Coach Riles coached Kareem and Magic, two of the best, sky hook, baby hook shooters of all time. And so Riles came up with showing him where to put his knee and all of that kind of stuff. And he must have did, I don't know, 15 to 20 reps of it that day. And then that night, I think he shot 3 and made 2 in the game. And so it's just like these guys, they got this thing. They can all they have to do is simulate it a few times, but they can apply it immediately. Chris Bosh had a lot of that in him too. From that standpoint, if you showed him something earlier that day or a couple of days before, he was able to apply it in a game like right away. And in my whole career, that's been the biggest difference that I've seen overall between great and good to players.
Yeah. Oh, I love you sharing that. Like, that's such a deep understanding of the process of expertise. And to be able to get players there, we need to understand it. And we need to understand what makes them experts beyond just, again, biomechanical skill. And that's really cool to hear that. So I guess, you alluded to this a little bit with some of that and some of these other things, but the different challenges, or maybe the things that we don't think about as much when it comes to coaching a veteran team versus a young team, which you've done parts of both.
Mm-hmm. I would say, there's a lot of differences, obviously. Your veterans get it. They understand how to prepare for the most part. If you tell them what to expect, they usually can answer the bell for the most part and execute what you're trying to get done, because they've been around it now. They're not dealing with all of the different ups and downs that come with learning NBA as a young player. And so you could throw more at them. You could try more things with them because they pick up stuff so much faster. You also you have to respect their body of work. I think that's really important when you're coaching a veteran, and respect his his knowledge and understanding of the game. And I even believe giving them a voice to, obviously to speak up and practice like a coach has always been a really important thing for me with the veteran players. When they see something or they got an idea or, whatever it may be, that they have that platform to stop the practice and speak up on it. With young guys, I think, finding that balance every day of teaching them without overloading them, but at the same time getting the right amount of reps of competition in and doing it at a competitive level. And that's the hard part, because when you're teaching something, you don't necessarily want to be going full board competitive, because usually a guy is going to resort back to his old habit really quickly. So you want to do enough of the teaching and get enough of the habit so that when you do start the actual competition and the hitting, that is now something that he uses as a weapon instead of resorting back to old habit. And so, that's that difficult line with young guys that you deal with. When you got a lot of them, you're always trying to walk that line of giving them the right amount of coaching and where. So both, unique situations. And I literally had the bookends of them. I had a much older team. Vince Carter was on that team in Memphis. That was a veteran team, Tony Allen. And so that experience was definitely like the other end compared to my young guys in New York who, all of them were kids. It was a stretch where that team was the youngest team in the history of the league, if I'm not mistaken. So, it was really you teaching and playing and competing on the fly, trying to get them to understand, how to win in the league while they're losing. And that's tough. But ultimately they get it. And I even think those young guys there will get it and going to keep getting better.
So you've talked about the impact, obviously, of Eric Spoelstra and you guys coming up together, so to speak, through the video room, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm curious, and it's kind of like a mythological creature for a lot of us that don't know much, but can you talk about the impact of Pat Riley?
Oh, man, his presence is,
It's got to be intense.
It is. And it's, but I say this a lot about him. When he loves you, you know it. Like he don't mess around with the gray area. You either with him and he's got your back and he's in the trench with you, or you're over there. And, to be in his trench is a great thing. And like, I think I said this to someone else was, I would try to spend time with him almost every day. As soon as practice was over, I would go over and see him and whoever was at practice that day. And, we would talk about, it'd be 20, 30 minutes of different things. And I would just soak it all up. I would try to take in every nugget I could possibly get. He'd draw up a play, because he understood it. He was like, man, Spo's got enough on his plate. He was like, show him this play later. And he'd draw up a play, and I'd take the play later on and show it to Spo. Say, hey, Riles wanted me to show you this. But he knew at that time Spo was already at his, full. So he wouldn't go directly up to Spo, check out this play. And so I got to spend that kind of time with him, from that standpoint. And he is just he's a brilliant man from the standpoint of understanding people and strategy, and he's a big thinker. He dreams big. He's not afraid to swing for the fence. He's one of the great just tacticians and motivators that the game has ever seen. I think we can all attest to that. What we know about him, and so, and the thing about it is he's genuine. It's not an act. It's not, he's not trying to please people. It's a genuine guy. He's a man's man.
Yeah.
He's just one of those guys that just, when he says he's about something, he's about it. And so, when you're working, under that kind of umbrella, where that's the expectation, the only thing it can do is make you better. And so, I know a lot of Pat rubbed off on Spo, a lot of Stan Van Gundy rubbed off on Spo, Ron Rothstein, Bob McAdoo, Keith Askins. Spo got a little bit of all of those guys, with Pat and Stan probably being, the main guys. But, that's why you see how good Eric Spoelstra is as a coach now. It's not a coincidence.
No question.
He was directly in contact with great coaches who really poured themselves into him.
So I cannot let you go, obviously, without getting into interview advice. Coach Spoelstra's told a story about how you guys game planned in a war room for some of the interviews you've gone through, and it sounded amazing. What a process to go through. But, honestly, you prepare for interviews your whole coaching career, but you've had a lot of experience interviewing. Can you give us some experiential advice that coaches could apply in the interview process?
Yeah, and the first one is just, you got to be genuine. Be who you are. You're not anybody else. Be yourself. That has to be the first thing they feel is that you are who you say you are. And that you have a standard about you, and these are things they can know about you before you walk in the room. And I would just say, as from a process standpoint, is really take the time to get to know the team you're interviewing for. Obviously, I know it sounds obvious, but you should know that team inside and out. Statistically, you should know the players that's returning, and their situations. I would say, be able to take their current roster and circumstances and morph that with your belief system and philosophy, and show where you guys have common ground and how you can utilize what's already in place. I think being able to point that out to people that's hiring is a really important thing. And I would say cover all your bases too. Like cover, from the standpoint of, when I say bases, the teaching utensils. So I would have my film ready to show philosophically what I believe in offensively and defensively. I would have the numbers, the analytics, some kind of picture I can paint with analytics to show them what I want to do offensively and defensively. I would just try to cover all of those bases and all of the utensils that coaches use. Try to paint your portrait of your team, and your vision in conjunction with the roster and the players that they have.
That's great advice. And, that process that you talked about, what I'm curious about, so much of it, like, I think you said something like you had 5 interviews in one days once.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that, which is mind-boggling to think. But then I'm curious, again, a lot of your skills transfer from one interview to the next. Just what you've got to get is more specific about each team and each organization as much as possible.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's why I said that the work is really in what you do before all of it. And my agent and I at the time knew that there was going to be a lot of jobs open. And to find the job that we thought was best, I might have to do a lot of interviews, because I had no, idea of, one, it was just flattering that people wanted to interview me, but I didn't have any idea of what I wanted if I could pick, until I got closer to the end and making a decision. But I really dove into the teams that had the job openings, and I just spent time researching them and learn about them and watching film on them, and reading all of the sheets that I could read. That gave me analytical pictures of them, and so by the time it was time to switch from one team to the next, because it really happened fast. It was like 10, 11 days, where we did these interviews, and to be able to hit that switch and go from Phoenix to New York to Charlotte, Charlotte to Atlanta, whatever it was, the order, or, Atlanta to Orlando, it was like, it was more comfortable for me because I had really prepared and really studied their rosters and knew their roster to a T, and I knew what I wanted to do as well as I thought I could know it. And so to be able to talk about that with the decision makers, from the standpoint of how the two merged, it was just exhausting. It wasn't as much hard as it was exhausting just from the amount of flying and running around and a lot of talking, for hours on end. And so, but the pre-prep is everything. You got to get know the people that you're talking about, and really understand yourself and what you're trying to do and be able to see the common ground.
Great insights. Coach Fizdale, I cannot thank you enough for your honest, open, genuine sharing, and just being able to listen to so many of the things that you said will have an impact on so many of us as coaches. So thank you for sharing the game.
No, thanks for having me. This is good stuff. That's what, if you're keeping it, I don't know what you're keeping it for, because somebody else is sharing and other people are getting better. So I think it's a critically important thing that we continue to try to help each other as coaches get better.
Well, I love that sentiment and appreciate it very much. Thanks for listening. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and to give the Basketball Podcast and this week's guest a shout out on social media to show your support for us sharing the game. And to stay up to date on all things Basketball Immersion, subscribe to our newsletter at basketballimmersion.com/newsletter.